My MOM told the hospital call me if he dies, while my grandpa fought the universe to save me. Hi, I'm Matteo. I'm 22. And when I was 17, my mother basically told a hospital, call me if he dies. I'm busy. That sentence is why you're listening to me right now. The rest is just collateral damage. Back then, I thought the worst thing that could happen to me was failing math or getting my bike stolen. I had no idea the real problem in my life wasn't on the street. It was in my own house. Quick rewind. My dad died when I was 8. Aggressive cancer. Diagnosis in spring. Funeral before Christmas. 6 months to dismantle an entire life. After that, my grandfather Don Ricardo to everyone else. Grandpa to me stepped in like it was the most natural thing in the world. He was the one at my soccer games. He was the one teaching me percentages at the kitchen table. He was the one who knew how I liked my eggs, and my mother. She was present in the legal sense. She paid bills. She signed school forms. She made sure the house looked perfect from the outside. Emotionally, she'd already left the building 2 years after my dad died. She remarried into Fernando. If you've ever seen a man who clearly wants the hot widow, but not the already existing child, that was him. Not openly cruel, not a cartoon villain, just absent. I was an optional feature he didn't want to pay for. Slowly, visits to my grandfather turned from every weekend to when it's convenient. Phone calls became shorter. Anything involving Ricardo got labeled as your father's family, and that term people use for annoying subscription I forgot to cancel by 17. The hierarchy was clear. Fernando, my mother's image still. I tried to stay out of the way. I worked weekends at a supermarket, saved every peso, and eventually bought my first motorcycle. A used Honda that ran better than half the cars in our neighborhood. It was ugly in a charming way. My pride and joy. My mother hated it on sight. You're going to kill yourself on that thing, she said. And don't expect me to cry at the funeral. I thought she was just being dramatic. Spoiler. She wasn't joking. The day everything snapped was a Saturday in October. Warm, dry, clear sky. I remember because I'd planned to ride across town to my grandfather's place, drink his terrible coffee, and complain about school like any normal grandson. Helmet on, engine humming. I felt untouchable. I stopped at a red light near an intersection I'd crossed 100 times. It turned green. I accelerated. A white car from the cross street blew the red at full speed. No brake lights. No hesitation. No chance. I had maybe half a second to realize I was about to get erased. There was the impact, loud, metallic, violent, and then I was flying. Not in the cool movie way. In the spinning, disorienting, limbs don't belong to me way. Asphalt tore into my skin. My left leg made a sound no leg should ever make. Something cracked in my chest. Then everything went dark when I came back. I was in an ambulance. The pain was beyond language. My brain was trying to send error codes. Left leg on fire. Ribs. Knives with every breath. Head underwater and also exploding. Stomach deep. Cold ache that felt wrong. Voices leaned over me. Quick and sharp. Shattered femur. Possible internal bleeding. BP dropping 17. Minor. Call the Guardian. The siren screamed above us. Fluorescent lights smeared into white lines. They pushed me into the air. Doors flew open. Hands cut my clothes. A mask went over my face. Someone pressed on my abdomen, and I nearly blacked out again. Then I heard it. We need emergency surgery. He's under 18. We need consent. A nurse, maybe mid-50s, kind eyes, grabbed a cordless phone and leaned close to me. Matteo, we're calling your mother now, okay? She said. I was drifting in and out, but I heard the dialing, the ringing, the click. Yes? My mother answered, already annoyed. Mrs. Vika, the nurse said, putting the call on speaker. This is Central Hospital. Your son Matteo has been in a serious motorcycle accident. He needs immediate surgery. There is a risk of death if we don't operate within the hour. We need you to come in and sign consent. There was a pause. The entire seemed to lean into that silence. Then my mother sighed loudly. Let me know if he doesn't survive, she said. I don't have time for paperwork. We're about to leave for dinner. Nobody moved. The nurse stared at the phone like it had just insulted her mother. Excuse me, ma'am. She managed. Your son needs surgery now. I heard you. My mother replied. Voice clipped, efficient. The same one she used when I bothered her during her shows. If it's that serious, call his grandfather, Ricardo Mendoza. His number should be in the boy's phone. He can sign. I can't come right now, and she hung up, just like that. Tell him I love him. No, I'm on my way. Nothing. The older nurse looked at me, and whatever she saw on my face made her take my hand and squeeze it hard. Easy, Joe, she whispered. We're going to find your grandfather. You're not alone, you hear me? I wanted to say, she really chose dinner. My throat only let out a broken sound. Tears started sliding sideways into my hair. Not because my leg was shattered, not because my chest felt caved in, because in that moment, hearing that sentence spoken out loud, I understood something I'd been refusing to accept for years. If it came down to me or her plans, she was never going to choose me. They dug my ruined phone out of what was left of my jeans, pulled the SIM, stuck it into a hospital device, and scrolled through my contacts. Ricardo, the nurse said. Found him, she dialed. One ring, Buono? My grandfather answered, slightly out of breath, like he'd run to the phone. Mr. Mendoza, this is Central Hospital. Your grandson Matteo has been in an accident. He needs emergency surgery. I'm on my way, he cut in. Start whatever you have to. I'll sign everything when I get there, sir. Protocol requires, don't wait for me, he said, voice cracking. Don't you dare wait for me. Save my boy. He hung up on them. The surgeon looked at the nurse. They nodded. Prep for surgery, he said. Consent when the grandfather arrives. They started rolling me toward the operating room. The double doors swung open, bright white swallowing everything. I remember one last thought before the anesthesia pulled me under. My mother had just left me to die. My grandfather had just declared war on the universe for me. And I had no idea how much those two choices were about to reshape my entire life. I woke up after surgery in a dim hospital room where the air smelled like disinfectant and metal, and the first thing I registered wasn't the pain. It was a hand rough, warm, trembling slightly wrapped around mine, like someone afraid I'd slip away if you let go. My grandfather, Ricardo Mendoza, 75, bad knees, strong spine. A man who'd worked with wood his whole life and still somehow had gentler hands than anyone else I knew. He was asleep in a plastic chair that looked like it had been designed by someone who hated the human body. His chin rested on his chest. His glasses had slid halfway down his nose. He looked exhausted in a way that scared me, like he'd cried himself into sleep and then forced himself to stay there. He opened his eyes the second I shifted. Matteo, he whispered, and his whole face folded in relief. Mio, you're awake. He stood so quickly the chair squeaked in protest. He cupped my face, studied me like he was memorizing every detail. You scared me, he said, voice cracking. You scared me so much. I tried to talk. My throat felt like sandpaper soaked in acid. Only a dry rasp came out. It's all right, he said immediately, pulling the water cup closer. He understood half words like parents are supposed to. Not once did he mention my mother. He didn't need to. Her absence filled the room so heavily it was almost a second patient. The next 15 days turned into a cycle. Pain meds, vital checks, beeping machines, bed food, worse sleep. Through all of it, my grandfather stayed. He didn't leave once. The nurses offered him blankets, pillows, even a recliner from storage because he refused to go home. He washed his face in the sink, ate sandwiches from the vending machine until one nurse started sneaking him cafeteria plates. He whispered, I'm right here, whenever I jolted from pain. He held my hand the night the stitches felt like fire. He held my hand when I cried for reasons I couldn't name. He held my hand when the nightmares started. My mother? She didn't hold anything. Not my hand, not her responsibility, not even the phone. Not once did she show up. Not once did she call. Not once did she ask a single nurse how I was. The staff noticed. They tried to hide their shock, but they weren't subtle. That grandfather is worth 10 mothers. One whispered outside my door, if this were my son, she'd never see him again. Another said, the night doctor wrote something in my chart and muttered, this is abandonment. This is criminal. I pretended to be asleep, but I heard every word. Every word sank in. Every word hurt in its own sharp way. On day 15, they discharged me. My grandfather wheeled me out, lifted me into his old blue Chevrolet with a gentleness most people reserve for infants or glass sculptures. When he started the engine, I expected him to turn right, toward the house where my mother lived with Fernando, the house where my room had already started feeling borrowed long before the accident. Instead, he turned left. "Grandpa," I said. Confused. Wrong way. He kept driving. His jaw clenched. His eyes stayed on the road. "No, Hijo," he said quietly. "We're going exactly where we need to go." I felt something cold gather in my stomach. "What happened?" I asked. He swallowed hard before answering. "Your mother called yesterday," he said, gripping the wheel tighter. "She said you shouldn't come home, that Fernando isn't comfortable with the situation, that you require care she doesn't have time for." I stared at him. My chest felt hollow. "She told me," he continued, voice breaking, "that you live with me now. No anger, no argument, no guilt, just disposal." A problem returned to sender. My grandfather pulled the car over. Suddenly overwhelmed, he leaned forward, elbows on the wheel, and cried silent, heavy tears that rolled down the deep lines of his face. I'd seen him cry only once before, at my father's funeral. He wiped his eyes, forced a breath, and looked at me. "You're not going back there," he said. "Not after what she did." "Not after what she didn't do," I nodded, because I couldn't trust my own voice. We drove in silence toward his house. What he didn't know was that while we crawled down that quiet road, building a new life out of the ashes of the old one, a man in a grey suit was standing at my mother's front door, holding documents that were about to collapse her entire world. But at that moment, it was just me, my grandfather, the hum of the engine, and a truth I finally stopped running from. She didn't lose me. She threw me away. And he was the one picking up the pieces. The man in the grey suit showed up at my mother's door 15 days after the accident. And from the way the story was later retold to me, he didn't even blink when she opened it with one earring on and the other still in her hand. He introduced himself in that clipped, professional tone lawyers use when they're not here to negotiate. "Mrs. Patricia Vega de Mendoza, I'm here to deliver formal notice regarding a legal action." Fernando stood behind her, and the moment the man said the word legal, Fernando took a half step back, already preparing his escape route. My mother tried to laugh it off. She actually laughed. "A lawsuit? By whom? For what?" The lawyer didn't indulge her. "Central Hospital is filing for abandonment of a minor in a medical emergency. State social services have also initiated proceedings for gross parental negligence. And your son's paternal grandfather has submitted documentation supporting full guardianship." She went pale. Not theatrical pale, sick pale. He opened a manila envelope and read aloud the hospital's documented call. Word for word. "Let me know if he doesn't survive." "I don't have time for paperwork." He took a beat and continued. "This call was recorded under hospital protocol." 3 staff members were present. My mother staggered backward like someone had hit her across the face. Fernando positioned himself farther from her, as if proximity alone could damage his reputation. "They misunderstood me," she said, voice quivering. "That's not what I meant." The lawyer didn't flinch. "The hospital noted your absence for 15 consecutive days. No visits, no inquiries, no support. The child was discharged today into the care of Mr. Ricardo Mendoza. He placed the documents into her hands. You are required to appear at the preliminary hearing in 2 weeks. I recommend securing legal counsel." He pivoted and walked away. No comfort, no conversation. Just the facts. That was the night everything around her finally snapped the curated image. The marriage she treated like a prize. The belief that consequences belong to weaker people. Meanwhile, I was lying in my grandfather's house with my leg in a cast, unaware that the system she always assumed would protect her image was finally taking notes. The next morning, Grandpa settled beside me with 2 cups of coffee, one for him, one just for the smell, because I wasn't allowed caffeine, and said, "Son, something happened last night." He told me everything calmly, without embellishment. The lawsuit, the recording, the state investigation, the custody petition he'd filed, and I realized that while I was focused on stitches, casts, and therapy schedules, the adults in the room had already moved into battlefield mode on my behalf. My Mother had ignored the hospital's phone calls, but the law hadn't, and my grandfather definitely hadn't. That was the midpoint, where this entire story stopped being about an accident and became something else entirely. The preliminary hearing arrived exactly the way my grandfather said it would. Cold, procedural, unavoidable. My mother walked in looking fragile, but not in a tragic way. Fragile like a glass ornament someone dropped and poorly glued back together. Her lawyer looked like he had prepped for the wrong case. He carried a thin folder. The hospital's lawyer carried a binder. We all sat. The judge, a woman with decades of experience etched into the hard lines of her expression, read silently for a long stretch. No one spoke. Even the air felt tense. Then the hospital's attorney stood and played the recording. My mother's voice filled the room. Let me know if he doesn't survive. I don't have time for paperwork. There was no distortion, no misunderstanding, no excuse strong enough to survive those 9 seconds. My mother covered her face, but it didn't matter. Everyone had heard it. The judge lowered the file and looked directly at her. In 15 days of hospitalization, she said, you neither visited nor contacted your son. You ignored critical calls. You neglected to appear when informed he'd exited a medically induced coma. Explain. I didn't know it was that serious. My mother whispered. The hospital's lawyer stood again. We made 4 follow-up calls, all unanswered, all documented. The judge's eyes sharpened. In 30 years on this bench, I have rarely seen parental indifference to this degree. My mother cried harder. But I noticed something even the judge seemed to pick up on. The tears were self-centered. Panic tears. Reputation tears. Not regret. Fernando wasn't there. He'd ended the relationship weeks earlier. He refused to tie his image to legal negligence. My grandfather had predicted that too. Judgment was delivered 3 months later. Termination of parental rights. Full custody to my grandfather. A fine. A permanent mark on her record. A restraining order until my 18th birthday. My grandfather signed the adoption papers with a steady hand. I became his son in every legal sense. The rest of the family found out, and the public humiliation that followed was something she did not expect. Great aunts confronted her at supermarkets. Neighbors whispered. Her job fired her for ethical concerns. She lost Fernando, her home, her image, everything she prioritized above me. It sounds harsh, but it was balance, not revenge. Choices finally meeting consequences. Meanwhile, I healed. My leg regained strength. My mind stabilized through therapy. I finished school. I went to college. I built a life. My grandfather, despite his age, became my anchor. Morning coffee. Soccer on Sundays. Stories about my dad. Quiet loyalty. Steady love. 2.5 years later, she resurfaced. A message. Long. Emotional. Apologetic. Full of explanations but empty of accountability. I met her anyway. I needed closure. She arrived looking older than her. Age fragile in a way that comes from regret mixed with self-pity. She apologized. She blamed Fernando. She blamed stress. She blamed depression. She blamed everything except the truth she never said. I chose not to come after she finished. I told her what I needed to say. I don't hate you. I just don't need you. I already have a family. And it's not you, she cried. I didn't. I got up, left money for my coffee, and walked out. My grandfather was waiting in the car. He didn't ask questions. He simply started the engine. Home, Grandpa. I said, home we go, son. I'm 22 now. My grandfather is 78. He's slower, but still strong. Still loving. Still the person who chose me when it mattered. And I've learned this. Family is not blood. Family is consistency. Prisons, sacrifice. Choice. My mother chose herself. My grandfather chose me. That difference shaped my entire life. The months after that courtroom verdict didn't feel victorious. They felt unfamiliar. For the first time in my life, I wasn't bracing for disappointment. My days settled into a rhythm that was almost healing by itself. Therapy twice a week. Rehab 3 times a week. Schoolwork at the kitchen table. Late-night conversations with my grandfather while we watched old soccer reruns he'd seen 24 times, but still reacted to like they were live. His house became more than a refuge. It became structure. Every morning, I woke up to the same sound. the steady scrape of his slippers on the tile floor as he made coffee. He brewed it strong, too strong, but I drank it anyway. It was a small ritual that meant more to both of us than either of us ever said aloud, and slowly. The trauma loosened its grip. The nightmares reduced. The panic attacks spaced out. My leg, once a broken mess held together by metal and stitches, began to move with certainty again. But healing is never a straight line, because while I moved forward, my mother's downfall spread through the family like wildfire. My grandfather tried to shield me from the gossip, but extended families are leaky ships. Information slips through every crack. Someone saw her working a temporary retail job. Someone else mentioned she'd lost weight. Another relative said she'd moved into a smaller apartment in a different district, and one great aunt subtle as a brick through a window told my grandfather during Sunday Mass, "Patricia is paying for her sins." I didn't ask for details. Not because I felt pity, because I felt nothing. A hollow that used to ache, but now just existed. Meanwhile, my grandfather and I built a life without her shadow. He insisted on attending every medical appointment, even the minor ones. He'd sit in the waiting room with a book he never truly read, glancing up every time someone walked by, half expecting bad news even when the visit was routine. His dedication, quiet and constant, worked its way into my bones. He was the reason I pushed through rehab. He was the reason I graduated. He was the reason I believed a future existed at all. There was a moment small and remarkable that changed me. We were driving home from therapy. Rain tapped against the windshield. My grandfather's hands gripped the steering wheel the same way they always did, firm, steady, reassuring. "Son," he said, not looking away from the road, "there is nothing in this world I wouldn't do for you. You know that, right?" I nodded. "I know." But he shook his head. "No, I need you to truly understand it. Not think it. Know it." It was the first time someone had ever said something like that to me, and meant it without conditions. I felt my throat tighten, not from sadness, but from recognition. This man had chosen me when my own mother had discarded me like an inconvenient errand. He had taken notes, saved records, paid bills, slept in chairs, signed papers, fought in courtrooms, and rebuilt my life brick by brick. He didn't need to say he loved me. He demonstrated it every single day. That's when the shift happened. I stopped being the kid whose mother abandoned him and became the young man whose grandfather saved him. And that identity rooted in strength, not grief, carried me forward. But the peace didn't last forever, because 2.5 years later, when I thought the past had finally closed its doors, my mother reappeared. A long message, a lengthy apology, a plea for forgiveness that rattled me more than all her silence ever had. I didn't respond at first. I let it sit, gathering weight. I read it over and over, searching for honesty and finding only excuses. Still, I agreed to meet her. Not for closure, not for reconciliation, for myself. Because the only way to truly let something go is to face it head on, and that meeting, those 5 minutes, would shut the door on 12 years of damage with a finality neither of us expected. But that's the next part. I chose a public CAF for the meeting, not because I feared her, but because I needed boundaries made of walls, witnesses, and exit routes. My grandfather insisted on driving me. He didn't say it, but I knew why. He needed to see me walk away whole. He waited in the car, parked where I could see him through the window. My mother arrived late, 15 minutes, long enough to remind me exactly what being her son used to feel like. When she finally walked in, I almost didn't recognize her. She looked older, not the natural aging kind, but the life hit me with a truck kind. Her hair was dull, her clothes mismatched, her hands trembling just enough to be noticeable. She spotted me and froze. For a moment, I saw something raw flicker across her face. Not love, not relief, fear. "Matteo," she breathed out, like my name tasted bitter and familiar all at once. "Thank you for meeting me." "I know I don't deserve you have 5 minutes," I interrupted. "Talk." She blinked, thrown off. She'd expected tears or shouting, or maybe a son desperate for reconciliation. She had built the fantasy. I was simply dismantling it. She started talking, and she talked fast like someone trying to outrun guilt. She blamed Fernando, saying he manipulated her, She blamed depression. Saying she wasn't herself, she blamed stress, work, circumstances, anything within reach, everything except the truth. She never said, "I chose not to come." She never said, "I valued my comfort more than your life." She never said, "It was my decision." She apologized for what happened, not for what she did. A textbook non-apology when she finally stopped. Hopeful and expectant, I took a slow sip of coffee and studied her for a full 5 seconds. "Are you done?" I asked. She nodded, eyes brightening with pathetic optimism. "Okay," I said. "Now you listen." She straightened, bracing herself like a student facing a grade she already knows she failed. "I don't hate you," I began. "Hate takes energy I'm not interested in wasting on you." Relief flashed across her face. "Too soon, but I also don't forgive you. And you are not my family." Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. "You had 17 years to be my mother. You chose not to. You chose Fernando over me every single time. And when I was dying, literally dying, you chose a dinner reservation." "That's not," she tried. I lifted a hand. She stopped. "That wasn't depression. That wasn't manipulation. That wasn't confusion. That was you. The real you. And the real you is not someone I want in my life." Tears rolled down her face. "Maybe real. Maybe not. I didn't care. My grandfather gave me what you never did. He showed up. He fought for me. He sacrificed for me. He's my family. That title belongs to him, not you." Her breath hitched like I'd struck her. And maybe I had, just not in the way she thought. I wasn't hurting her. I was handing her the mirror she'd avoided for years. "I hope you get better," I said finally, standing. "I hope you build a life you can live with, but build it without me." I placed money on the table for my coffee and walked out without looking back. Outside, my grandfather was in the car with his hands on the steering wheel, watching me with that soft, protective concern he always carried the moment our eyes met. He nodded once, not asking, not probing, simply acknowledging the finality on my face. I opened the door and got in. "Home, Grandpa?" I said. He smiled small, warm, proud. "Home we go, son." And just like that, the last tie to the woman who birthed me but never mothered me snapped cleanly, quietly, permanently. What I didn't know then was that walking away would finally allow me to grow roots in peace, in stability, and in the kind of love you only receive from someone who truly chooses you every day. Life didn't magically transform after that CF meeting. There was no cinematic sunrise, no emotional epiphany, no sudden burst of joy. What there was, however, was stillness. A kind of silence you only notice when the noise of someone's chaos finally stops vibrating inside you. For the first time since I could remember, my days belonged to me, not to fear, not to waiting, not to bracing myself for her next absence. My grandfather and I settled into our own rhythm, something steady and familiar. He woke up early. I stayed up late. He cooked badly. I cooked well. He loved stories. I loved listening to them. We were a mismatched pair, but a perfect one. I finished high school. I started college. I worked part-time. I healed, not in a dramatic way, but in slow, quiet increments. I learned how to exist without looking over my shoulder. My mother tried contacting me exactly once more, 2 months after the CAF meeting. A long email, pages of rambling, desperation, half apologies and excuses glued together with self-pity. I didn't open it. I deleted it without reading a word, not out of spite, out of self-preservation. Some doors should remain closed, some wounds heal only when you stop scratching at the scar. Around that time, something unexpected happened. My grandfather, old school, proud, stubborn in that gentle way elders often, I started making small changes. He let me pay half the utilities. Even though he protested at first, he stopped, insisting on mowing the lawn alone. He let me drive him to doctors' appointments. He accepted help without guilt. It took me months to understand why. One night, we sat on the porch watching the streetlights blink on one by one. He sipped his coffee. I drank water because his coffee could dissolve steel. He sighed a long, heavy exhale. "You know," he said, "I thought I'd spend my last years alone." I looked over at him. But then life gave me a second son. There was nothing sentimental in his tone. No dramatic tremble. Just fact. Truth lay bare. It hit me harder than anything my mother ever said or failed to say. He wasn't raising me out of duty. He wasn't caring for me out of obligation. He had chosen this life. Chosen me. I felt something warm unfurl in my chest, quiet gratitude, deep and grounding. I leaned back in the chair. "You're not spending them alone," I said. He didn't respond, but he didn't need to. His small smile was enough. Over those months, he became not just my guardian, not just my rescuer, but my home. He was there when I got into college. He really cried at my graduation. He took pictures badly. With his thumb over the lens, he bragged shamelessly to every neighbor within shouting distance, and gradually, the wound my mother left stopped being an open cut. It became a scar, a clean one. One I no longer needed to hide or reopen. But healing doesn't stop life from moving forward. 2 years after that CF meeting, my grandfather started slowing down just a little. Nothing dramatic, just age doing what age does quietly. Gradually, inevitably, for the first time, I became the one who watched him closely, the one who made sure he ate enough, the one who drove him places, the one who stayed up when he had trouble. Sleeping. It wasn't a burden. It wasn't a duty. It was love. The same love he had given me without hesitation. The same love my mother had never chosen, and in those small exchanges, simple routines, shared meals, quiet evenings, I realized something important. My life had stopped being defined by what she didn't give me. It was being redefined by what he did, but the real test, the one that would cement everything, was still ahead, and it came from the last person I expected, my mother's family. It happened at a family gathering. I didn't plan to attend one of those big, loud, chaotic events that only extended families can create. My grandfather wanted to go, not for the drama, for the tamales. A T-78. He claimed he didn't fear death, he feared poorly made food. So I went with him. People stared when we arrived. Not at him, at me. Everyone knew the story. Everyone knew the trial. Everyone knew the recording. Secrets don't survive in families, they ferment. We sat. We ate. We pretended not to notice the whispers. Then, midway through the meal, my great-aunt Marisol approached. She wasn't delicate. She never had been. She had the emotional subtlety of a freight train. "Matteo," she said loudly enough for half the room to hear, "your mother reached out to us. She wants to see you." The air in the room tightened. My fork paused midair. My grandfather stiffened beside me. I set the fork down. "And she's a wreck," Marisol continued. "Alone. Poor. Regretful. She says she's changed. She needs forgiveness to move on." There it was, the final push. The one everyone expected me to soften at. I looked at my grandfather first, not for permission, but for grounding. His eyes met mine, calm and steady. He wasn't afraid of my answer. He wasn't hoping for it to go one way or the other. He just supported me, the same way he always had. I turned to Marisol. "No," I said simply. A ripple ran through the table. Someone gasped. Someone else muttered "Dearest M.O." But I didn't raise my voice. I didn't explain. I didn't justify. "She's still your mother," Marisol pressed. "No," I repeated, steady as stone. "She was my biological parent. That's all. She gave you life." I shrugged. My grandfather saved it. Marisol opened her mouth, but I leaned back calmly. "Forgiveness is not owed," I said, "and reconciliation is not healing." I healed without her. Silence fell thick, heavy, undeniable. My grandfather placed his hand on my back, not a gesture of possession or pride, but of quiet solidarity. We finished our meal. We left early. We went home. In the car, as streetlights blurred across the windshield, my grandfather spoke softly. "I'm proud of you, son." I nodded. I know, because I finally believed it. Fully, deeply, without doubt. Years have passed since then. I'm 22 now. I have a degree. A job I like. A life I built with my own hands and with his unwavering support. I still live with my grandfather. Not because I have nowhere else to go. Not because I'm afraid to leave. But because time with him is finite. And I refuse to waste a second of it. My mother never reached out again. I hope she's well. Truly, I hope she found whatever she needed to rebuild herself. But she is no longer part of my story. My grandfather is. He is my home, my father, my constant. And sometimes, When we sit on the porch at sunset, he'll sigh and say, "Your dad would be proud of you, and for once in my life. I don't wonder if it's true. I feel it, because I finally became someone I am proud of." And that is the ending I never expected but always needed.